Texas-USC proved to be a great one in 2017 at the Coliseum when the odds makers in Vegas didn't necessarily forecast it that way. This time around, we would expect another really good game in Austin as USC pays the return visit after a double OT escape at the Coliseum. We bring in Steve Helwig from the campus television station there at the University of Texas, also Hustle Belt, where he covers the MAC and the Daily Texan as well. This, of course, Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. So, Steve, we appreciate you joining us once again.
Thank you. I'm definitely looking forward to talk about this game. It's a big week for both teams. One has to go to 2-1, one has to go to 1-2. So I'm excited to preview this.
Yeah, so USC obviously not able to score much at Stanford, falling 17-3 for Texas. A trip to Maryland, somewhat of a neutral site game at FedEx Field, but obviously Maryland with the advantage there, and surprisingly falling for a second consecutive year to the Terps. Then they come back home. There's always that guess, okay, are they going to be a bit let down in this trap game between Maryland and USC, or are they going to come out fighting and mad and blow out a team like Tulsa? And they won by a touchdown, 28-21. So I saw some of the Maryland game. I got to tell you, I didn't see a lick of the Tulsa effort. So just your impressions on Texas football and what's been underperforming thus far.
I thought the Tulsa game started out really well for Texas. You go in with a 21-0 lead at halftime, but then at the end of the game, the defense just fell apart. The secondary looked to have some of those gaping holes they had against Maryland, allowing the streak routes left and right. That's how Maryland kept scoring on them. And Tulsa was doing it in the second half. Once Tulsa got a less conservative offense and started really opening it up, Texas's defense was put on notice. And 28-21, that score does not sit well with any Texas fans at all. Tom Herman came into the press conference afterward and said that if we get to a point where we stop celebrating any wins, we've failed to do our job as coaches. So Herman doesn't seem too concerned about it. But Tulsa's 2-10 a year ago. They didn't look too great against the FCS team in Central Arkansas, trailing in the second half. And they come back and nearly beat Texas. And if it weren't for 3 missed field goals by their kicker in the first half and some dropped easy touchdown passes, who would have known what could have happened? Texas could be 0-2 at this point. But Texas has shown some strengths this season. Second half end of the first half against Maryland, they're down 24-7. They cut it to 24-22, get a lead in the second half. It looked like things were starting to gel. Texas was starting to get a rhythm offensively and defensively, getting key stops against Maryland. And Sam Ehlinger and the offense were able to move the ball forward and score touchdowns. Same thing happened in the first half of Tulsa. But sometimes the play calling just gets a little bit out of whack. There's been a lot of question marks on Tim Beck and how he's been handling this offense since he was hired by Tom Herman in 2017. And, I mean, the offense last game put up good numbers. Sam Ehlinger went 21 of 27. The rushing game, the backs Trey Watson and Keontae Ingram both had good games on the ground. But it was just in the second half. They weren't themselves with play calling. They weren't playing to their players' strengths. They were just doing short check down throws and halfback dives up the middle, which were predictable and getting stopped by Tulsa. So I think Texas has a lot of talent. I think the play calling's been one thing holding them back so far. Same thing with USC. And I think this week 3 game is going to be very telling of what Texas Longhorns team we're going to get this year, because Maryland wasn't a very convincing performance. Tulsa was for a half, but the second half, the Golden Hurricane almost escaped Austin with a victory. So this is definitely going to be a huge game for Texas, and there's a lot to learn about this team this week.
So, of course, Steve, you know that most people are going to start at the quarterback position, especially when he's not a star player. Now he's well known because he's been around the program for a while now and obviously got his playing time split with Shane Buechele last year and won the job this year outright, and had some costly plays down the stretch against Maryland and turning the ball over, especially on that last drive when he just kind of flung one up in the air, and that ended the hopes against Maryland, coming off a nice little 21 of 27 outing against Tulsa with 2 touchdowns and no turnovers through the air. So Sam Ehlinger at just under 64% completion percentage, but the 2 interceptions again against Maryland were costly. Your thoughts about his play thus far?
Sam Ehlinger, you're going to get very great play or very poor play. It's not too much in between. I've always labeled him as a high risk, high reward type player. He's the one who is able to get those extra yards with his legs, but at a certain cost. Like last year when he tried fighting for that touchdown against USC, ended up fumbling in the double overtime period. He'll try to make that risky big throw at the end of the game. Sometimes it works, sometimes it gets intercepted. He doesn't really like to quit. He always pushes. You don't see throwaways too often from him. He'll always try to make the big play. He's a very talented player. We saw a lot of it in the Maryland game where his deep ball improved in the first half. He threw a beautiful strike to Devin Duvernay early in that game. And passes, he connected really well with his receivers. And short routes, long routes, little Jordyn Humphrey, he had a good connection there. And the most important thing last week was he stayed interception free, which has been a huge mistake of his. You look at Sam Ehlinger last year, USC game, there's a fumble at the end. Oklahoma State in overtime, Texas pretty much had it wrapped up with a win. All they had to do was score a touchdown from a yard out, throws an interception in the end zone. Last year against Texas Tech, Texas would have gone into bowl season 7-5, probably gotten a better bowl game. And Sam Ehlinger throws an interception against Texas Tech. He tries so hard at the very end of the games to make the big play that sometimes it comes at a cost, but he's a very talented player, and Tom Herman will keep riding him as a starter as the season goes along. And we saw he has a lot of confidence to him. His second career start was that USC game last year that he led, which almost was a game-winning drive in the fourth quarter and almost a victory over what was the number 4 team in the nation.
Steve Helwick on the line. You can join him covering MAC football at Hustle Belt, but also the Texas Longhorns at his Pride and Joy, the University of Texas, his campus television station work there, and also the Daily Texan, as the Longhorns obviously try to make amends from last year's performance at the Coliseum, which was extremely strong considering a double-digit underdog status, and they almost pulled out a game, losing in overtime, double overtime, to Sam Darnold and company on the road, and they get the return trip from USC and JT Daniels and company. So, we talk about it all off season, Steve, in regards to players that we're going to see for the first time, or guys that didn't get a whole lot of attention because maybe they were on special teams or they redshirted, but now have to be impact players. Are there, through 2 games, any guys that stand out as guys that have jumped off the page, guys that whether good or bad, that we don't know a whole lot about, but are going to be key factors the rest of the year?
I'd love to say Keontae Ingram because that's one of their running backs. They got Trey Watson, a grad transfer from Cal, and Keontae Ingram, new to the program coming in this year. And Ingram has looked really good this year. He has over 100 rushing yards in 2 games, over 6 yards a carry, and 2 touchdowns. He's done an excellent job. But he got injured towards the end of the Tulsa game and checked out, and he is listed as doubtful for the USC game. So that is a big concern for Texas there. They have a lot of running backs, but I think without Keontae Ingram, one of their best, they'll have to have more playing time with Daniel Young or Kyle Porter, their 3rd and 4th backs. But the guys that I think are very impressive are both in the secondary because they're both true freshmen, high recruits, Caden Stearns and BJ Foster, and they both got their first interceptions last week against Tulsa, which they both were incredible plays that they made. Very talented 5-star freshmen. It'll be interesting to see how they go up against another opposing freshman in JT Daniels in the secondary. So there'll be a lot of new faces there that'll be controlling the passing offense and passing defense when USC has the ball. And I think those are some of the key names to watch. They're both getting a lot of playing time in Texas's 3-3-5 defense. So those are some of the big names that I think are important to watch. As far as returning players for Texas that we haven't mentioned yet, Lil Jordyn Humphrey has had an incredible season at the wide receiver position. Last week, he had 7 catches, 109 yards, and a touchdown. Looked very good, strong-armed receiver. His name is a misnomer. He's a very, very big guy. So is Colin Johnson. But Johnson, this has been controversial among Texas fans. Colin Johnson doesn't get the ball much. He's a Biletnikoff watch list. He was on the Biletnikoff watch list. And last year he had an incredible game against USC, probably about 150 yards receiving. Very strong receiver. I think he could be top 3-round talent in the NFL. But he only has 4 receptions last week. Texas doesn't throw to him too often, and I think he's the most talented receiver there. So that's a player I think that we need to keep our eye on going forward to see if Texas starts to use him more, because I think the Longhorns offense could be more dangerous and versatile if so.
All right, Steve Helwig's on the line. He is with the Daily Texan, also Hustle Belt, also doing a whole lot of work because he's got another venue there as well with the University of Texas on campus television station. And just to round out the defensive rundown, if you're going to watch Texas for the first time, as many people are this year, in taking on USC, big Fox game at 8 o'clock Eastern time tonight. PJ Locke leads the defense with 14 tackles. Anthony Wheeler, a guy that we talked about during the offseason, with 13 stops. And Chris Boyd, obviously a star from last season, third on the team in tackles as well. We see that wanted to spotlight Brecklin Hager with 2 tackles for loss, and Wheeler as well had 1.5 sacks against Tulsa. Little Jordyn Humphrey, as Steve mentions, with a big game against Tulsa with 7 catches for over 100 yards in that game. Colin Johnson thus far with only 7 catches on the season. Little Jordyn Humphrey with 13 and a touchdown. The running game, not spectacular, but a little bit better than it's been. Was really one of the worst rushing attacks in Power 5 football last year. But you mentioned the absence of Keontae Ingram coming up this week, and that's going to be missed at 16 carries for 101 yards and 2 touchdowns. Trey Watson, the guy gaining most of the workload this season thus far with 30 carries in 2 games. So in regards to USC, they scored no touchdowns last week. It's just the 3rd time in 25 years that USC has left the field without reaching the end zone. JT Daniels, much expected of him as just a true freshman who could be playing high school football as an 18-year-old, but took on UNLV, showed some impressive ceiling his first game, and it's still obviously there, but took his lumps on the road last week in taking on a Stanford team that's awfully good.
Yeah, USC, I've honestly not been very impressed by them this season, and that includes the UNLV game. UNLV was still within 1 possession in the late 3rd quarter of that game, and USC needed the 4th quarter to finally pull away from a team that is almost always in the cellar of the Mountain West. UNLV, I don't think, has made a bowl game since 2013 Heart of Dallas Bowl off the top of my head. But USC last week against Stanford, that was a no-show. And Stanford is a top 10 team, so any loss to a top 10 team on the road should be respectable. But Stanford didn't even play that well. Their passing offense wasn't good. Stanford had a lot of punts throughout the game. It was just a field position battle the entire game. 8 punts Jake Bailey had. And USC's defense did the job, but their offense under JT Daniels didn't look that good. I think they had 3 turnovers. USC was punting an awful lot too. They had 6 punts in that game. They were never able to come up with those big plays, getting, say, a 30-yard pass or something that comes and swings the momentum, and they finally pierce into Stanford territory. That never happened. And I think that's very concerning to USC. So Texas opens this game as 3.5-point favorites. I think a lot of it has to do with USC leaving their comfort zone and going on the road again after their no-show on the road at the Farm last week. So USC, this is going to be a big game for JT Daniels after struggling last week against Stanford. You mentioned how he could still be playing high school football. He's 18 years old. Following up a guy like Sam Darnold is no easy act. Darnold was able to be a star as a redshirt freshman. Now it's time to see what Daniels can do as a true freshman. Maybe last week can be a big learning experience for him. 2 interceptions, 0 touchdowns, and a sub-50 completion percentage. But based on what we've seen between Daniels and Ellinger so far, both have had their flaws. Both have also had their successes. But I think Texas has the edge at quarterback going into this week.
Yeah, it's a much different USC team in regards to the star power, not necessarily some of the players along the lines of scrimmage that make up the core of the team, but in regards to quarterback, running back, wide receiver, the star play that we saw highlight USC season last year and the year before with Ronald Jones at running back, a 1,600-yard rusher, Deontay Burnett, who lit up the Rose Bowl 2 seasons ago and had a big statistical year last year. And of course, Sam Darnold moving on to the New York Jets and making his debut just 2 nights ago in fine fashion. And so they had all that star power at the skill positions that are recognizable. And now they're breaking in a true freshman at quarterback. They've got a couple of capable runners. Stephen Carr was one of the top recruits in the nation, who's run for 106 yards on 19 carries thus far and gained some valuable playing time as the understudy for Ronald Jones last season. And then at wide receiver, guys like Tyler Vaughns, Michael Pittman, guys that have played in the past, but now have to step up and be that number one guy. Amon-Ra St. Brown is a freshman as well, who played with JT Daniels at Mater Dei in Los Angeles, and they've hooked up for a couple scores, or 1 touchdown thus far, 9 catches for St. Brown and 137 yards. So a lot of talent on the roster, but obviously they're going to go through some growing pains with a freshman at quarterback. And still, despite all that skill and speed, issues along the offensive line that seem to persist for USC. So it doesn't look to be a banner season for the Trojans, but in the Pac-12 South, they will surely contend in what might be the weakest division in Power 5 college football, but will have their hands full at Austin. So, Steve, I don't know what your weekly ritual is in terms of when you make a prediction. I don't want to press you into one right now, but have you made a selection on Texas-USC?
I have. I actually think Texas can escape with a win. If the game were in Los Angeles, I would say otherwise. But Texas at home, I like them. This is going to be a low-scoring game. I think both defenses are very good, especially at stopping their run. USC has guys like Cameron Smith, Christian Rector anchoring that run defense. Texas has Brecken Hager and Anthony Wheeler, who've done a good job. And with the secondaries aren't as talented on each team, but then again, we have younger quarterbacks in Ellinger and Daniels, and the passing games will struggle. This will be a low-scoring battle just like last year. I don't think any team reaches 20 until the late 4th quarter. I think it's going to take a game-winning drive from Sam Ellinger and Texas, probably down 17-16, where they'll score when.
Unfortunately, Steve freezing up on us. I was just going to mention that. Go ahead, Steve. I think you're back.
Okay. I was predicting that Texas would probably get a game-winning drive. It'd be close, just like last year's. I mean, every single USC-Texas game I remember in my lifetime has been a thriller at the very end. So I think Ellinger can finally put together a game-winning drive, but these defenses will be relentless, and I wouldn't expect both teams to even score 20 points in this one. It's going to be close. In regards to USC, I think a 1-2 start is going to be concerning for Trojans fans, but I'm sure they can find some comfort in the fact that they started, I think, 1-3 in 2016, and Sam Darnold led them to 9 straight victories and a number 3 ranking in the nation in the AP poll to end the season. So I think it's going to be another season of USC growing pains to start early.
They've talked about it all off season, making those parallels to Sam Darnold as a redshirt freshman, JT Daniels as a true freshman, similar hype, ceiling, dynamic playmaking ability, and arm talent for both. And as you mentioned, Sam Darnold on the sideline for the opener, in which USC was crushed by Alabama 52-6. They put him in the lineup. They still lose to Stanford. He takes his – no, actually, they lost to Stanford with Max Brown in the lineup. Then they finally put Darnold in against Utah on the road. He played a really good game, but they lost at the wire at Utah. So it was 1-3 in September. Then, of course, they go on the remarkable run, prove really to be the best team in the Pac-12 by the end of the season, even though Washington won the conference and Colorado inexplicably got to the championship game. But USC was the team that won the Rose Bowl, and Washington and Colorado proved pretty inferior in postseason play. And then here we are 2 years later, and maybe a similar script rolls out for the remainder of the season, in which USC takes its knocks on the road early, and then they find a rhythm with a developing quarterback, and things look bright for the future, but maybe they finish 9-3, 8-4, something in that range, and don't quite hit their goals or expectations for the program, but things look good going forward. I know for me personally, Steve, I was looking at hoping that USC would be a favorite going to Austin, because I was selecting Texas the entire offseason to win this game at home. And now it's a 3.5-point spread. Wow, it's going to be a tough selection from the point spread standpoint, but I do, at least at this point, without giving it much thought, do like Texas, similar to your scenario, to pull out a really good game at home with little fireworks, but still a tight, intense game in Austin. All right, Steve Helwick on the line from, you can catch him at the Daily Texan, also at Hustle Belt, covering MAC football in the University of Texas campus television station right there as well. Subscribe to my YouTube channel, subscribe to my weekly newsletter, The Voice of College Football. All you need to do is send your email to MarkRogersTV, and we're only 2 weeks underway, and we've got over 60 on the mailing list, so a lot of positive feedback. So you'll want to jump on there for a channel update, but more importantly, stats, trends, and facts and figures and fun facts that you won't find anywhere else each and every Monday. Steve, we appreciate you stopping by, breaking down some Texas football for us.
Thank you so much. Looking forward to this Saturday night's game.
For anyone watching on the live stream, we will send another link directly after this. We've got USC talk, so you want to stick around for the complete wrap-up and preview on USC and Texas with Scott Wolf from Inside USC coming up right now.